Whilst you're doing that, Chris, the AI transformation that's coming to us, you have to start. That was the biggest thing that we got. We had a 2-day leadership retreat. The anxiety in the room when they started, we did about 5 or 6 hours on AI over the 2 days. At the end of it, we ran a challenge and split into teams to prepare use cases. And what the teams learned within about 36 hours to come up with use cases for AI was incredible. The talent over the businesses and the savings we're going to achieve are unbelievable. So just do it. Would be my advice.
Okay, well, if I could perhaps ask the first question to get the panel going. And we have Robin on the podium representing Mentor Ellison. Everything that we've been discussing relates to care in retirement villages, and yet many people say retirement villages are a property play, in that it's a good business for people to live independently and you make your money out of a property transaction. Robin, what are the challenges for a traditional village operator to bring private aged care into an existing village? What challenges do they face legally, property, zoning, etc.?
Well, how long have you got, Chris? That's sort of like, that could be a day seminar, I think. But I guess a quick snapshot would be, just on the legal front, I think one of the very significant changes is that currently if you're the independent operator, you're operating under the retirement villages legislation in each state, which is itself pretty significant compliance obligations. If you go into sort of model that Byron, obviously, for example, like into, I'm assuming that you're being registered providers. So it immediately means that you're going to be dealing with the aged care regime and have to, if you're not already a registered provider, you will need to, in order to operate and take the, use the care packages or supported homes that will be from 1 November, and become a care manager under those packages, you will have to sign up under the Aged Care Act regime. So there's obviously some very significant obligations arise out of that. I mean, it's all manageable whilst people are doing it, but you will be faced with grappling with both the RV legislation and the aged care and need to be compliant. So there'll be a very significant increase in your compliance obligations and the systems and processes that you will need to have in place in order to make sure that you are doing all of those things. And there are also some pretty significant statutory duties that arise under the Aged Care Act, don't exist under the RV Act. And those duties go right up to the board level in terms of making sure that the governance systems are correct and that the regs that providers in fact complying with all of the conditions of this registration. And in fact, all the employees and also associated providers, if you are also using or subcontracting some of your care provision to a third party provider, which is possible, but you can't escape liability for the actions of those associated providers. So that's number one point. It's just a fact of life. Unfortunately, the laws are out there to protect residents, and there's just a few more you're going to be taking on board. So that's probably number one. Number two would be there are some significant things to think about in terms of existing villages needing to convert their built form in a way that might help you, take on the provision of aged care to the extent that companies like that, LDK. So you will, if you've got a traditional RV, we talked about the fact that it's a villa style. It's not the best environment in which to deliver higher standards of care when a resident does get to that point where they need more intense care, particularly to take them through things like palliative care. So you will not necessarily therefore maybe need to look at redevelopment of your village, adding facilities, maybe adding a care apartments so that people can transition on that sort of one promise move that Byron's talked about, say their villa into a more sort of intense care environment when they age a little further and need more attention. It's all possible contractually very easily. I mean, we can design a contract, as Byron has, that a resident signs once when they enter, and it takes them right through that continuum right to the end, without having to recontract or sell a unit or go to all that trouble. So that's all very doable. But the thing that is willingness there is if you need to go and do redevelopment. There are obviously restrictions under the Retirement Villages Act in every state around redeveloping the village. And I guess the bottom line is in New South Wales, for example, you cannot, there are provisions in that act that require you to get the consent of residents or at least a special resolution to redevelop a village or to alter a facility or service, which will be inevitable in the redevelopment. So you need the resident community on board, and Byron's proved already that that's also doable. May take a lot of negotiation and doing things like varying contracts and so forth to get the resident community on board. But it's just one of the processes you'll have to go to if you're going to convert rather than build a greenfield site. There's also the Class 9C issue you mentioned, Chris, which is that when you reach a certain point, you're going to cross that threshold where the activities you're conducting in the village require a 9C classification of buildings, which you may not already have in any of your retirement villages at the moment. Certainly, that can be compartmentalised to with new parts of the village complying with 9C, and the old parts that don't necessarily need to be 9C still remaining Class 1, Class 2. But that is something that will need to be considered just from a built form point of view. And then planning's the other one. I mean, there may be, again, a lot of the planning approvals for existing retirement villages basically are approving retirement, the uses for retirement living. Again, we're crossing the line potentially here to become aged care, not because you're building an aged care facility, but because you're conducting activities that fall into the realm of being aged care from a planning point of view. So planning approvals may be, or modified planning approvals may be required in order to make that conversion. Depending on how far you intend to go into the provision of care, I mean, there's obviously a number of different models in the market. Not everyone has to potentially go as deeply into the care provision as LDK has, who are taking people on through the part of care. So yeah, they're just some of the quick snapshot of some of the legal issues.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? On the front?
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's presentation. It's fantastic. I'm Lorraine Poulos. My question is to you, Byron. Around your villages and the access to care, what percentage would be using home care package funding? Number one. Number two, are you a provider of that services? And what are your plans in the future as those contribution rates, particularly for self-funded retirees, will increase the more, the higher volume they use? So just some thoughts around your planning to, I guess, take advantage of those changes and any insights for other operators.
Yeah, so we are an approved provider for home care. So we obviously have very strict care governance frameworks and all compliance things that we need to do to comply with that. Percentage of home care recipients is probably, out of all the care that we provide, home care package funding is probably around 40%-ish. We also DVA for DVA Gold Card, and then some people pay privately as well, and a number of people will top up. One of the challenges with our model, and we're trialling some solutions for that is at the moment, we bang on really hard about the consumer wants certainty and transparency, and we deliver, and then you get to the point where they go, well, how much is my care going to cost? And you can only answer that honestly and say, well, I don't know, because I don't know what your care needs are tomorrow, 5 years. So we're actually trialling a capped care lifetime. So a lifetime cap for what you'll pay privately for the top up of your care. So we've got a huge amount of data from residents that we've looked after, a huge amount of data from obviously nursing homes and other areas. So we're trialling that at stage 1 at Airfield, what we're calling the LDK Plus. So as part of the membership, you increase the membership price a little bit, but we'll make a promise that you won't pay more than X dollars of care. X dollars towards your care, provided we're your home care provider, and there's not obviously T's and C's. We are doing it organically at both Greenway and the landings as well, not a more bespoke basis. So it hurts us when people leave, and residents' families usually are driving that because of cost. So we then offer a tailored capped care. It'll be a combination of a daily cap of care and then a lifetime contribution towards that. So we're getting some good feedback on that. You need to be very careful you don't blow your business up. So we feel that we've got a bit of a good spot at that at the moment, but we'll continue to assess that as well.
Do you find they choose to have other providers coming in, or do you encourage them to have you as the provider?
We encourage them to make their own decision. We're obviously legally obligated to do that, and we have probably 2 or 3 of the landings have external care. At Greenway, I think 1, and that's totally fine. But when they can see that we deliver in shorter increments of time, we have 24/7 care on site. You don't have to pay for travel for your carer. They start to understand they get a lot better bang for their buck.
Same care. So, same care.
Same carer, yeah, consistency of carer. Yeah, it's all of those things. Once they see that, we don't really have to have that sort of conversion discussion with them to use us.
Another question in the back. Thank you, James.
Whilst that question's being asked, we just wanted to comment. Last week we hosted 2 IC from the Aged Care Quality Commission and 2 ICs from the Department of Health, and they had an entourage with them. They were all very, very interested in how retirement villages are going to deliver care. So there is a very open mind at all levels to get a deeper understanding of how it can be done. So it's out there. They're very interested to see how it's going to work. The shared care program is going to help with that.
Yeah, hi, Dan Marisi from the Falls Estate. It's probably a question for all of the panel members. How do you, with this continuum of care that we're talking about, have been talking about for years and now it's been implemented, what are your experiences on when a couple has one partner that obviously goes downhill or inevitably will go downhill faster than the other and needs to be moved into a higher level of care? How do you practically handle that from a technology perspective, but also an operator and a legal perspective?
Yeah, I've probably got a bit more experience. So as part of your clinical case management, we are assessing every resident at least every quarter. So even if you don't receive a second of care from us, we are communicating with our residents. As residents' care needs starts to increase, we'll be starting that moving discussion 6-9 months ahead of that. What you'll find from a human behavioural perspective is that the carer wants to care for their partner. They then start to experience carer fatigue, and they get to a point where they're exhausted and they're sad. So we try and get ahead of that discussion at least 6 months ahead. So you're talking about it, getting a level of acceptance about it, and then almost curating that conversation and as it progresses. So it's not a, oh my God, I'm gassed, I'm fatigued, something that's happened now. So you're sort of allowing that discussion with family, with other treating practitioners to start to encourage that discussion, because we need to care. And it's beautiful. One of the residents that we had at the panel yesterday relayed her experience. She said the carers are actually caring about me just as much as they were caring about my husband who needed the care. And then part of the one we've promised, if they need to downsize, it's not an extra ingoing contribution that the partner pays. They will pay the weekly fee and they'll pay for their care, but they don't have to double up on their ingoing contribution if the couple's split. Because they want to stay together for as long as possible, and the numbers don't lie, the actual time period that you have them split is not a huge amount of time, because they want to care for their partner for as long as possible. So economically it doesn't hurt that much, but it increases your value proposition because it gives them that certainty.
Well, I guess one of the major problems we see now is residents in independent living retirement needing to be separated when their partner has to go to an aged care facility. I guess one of the massive benefits of having private care in RV is that they will be still living in the same community, which will solve that pretty enormous social problem that we're seeing a lot of.
The only thing I'd add to this from a technology point of view, we can sort of support whatever care needs following, but different levels of acuity in the same room is very hard to monitor. So, sleep patterns, you've got trying to monitor some motion patterns and so forth, but it's doable. It's just, obviously that is confusing.
And from a software perspective and care and assessment, for them it's encouraging to see that you have thought about all of these different areas of their life. So when they see the assessment process, when they see the care plan at the end or what you're thinking of supporting them with, they then know that, okay, you have thought about my sleep, my mobility, but also about my social engagement and my ability to continue with my community. And that's what the software is designed to also capture.
Just a question on technology providing. We talk a lot about duty of care, and then there's the care governance realms that you sort of go into when you become a provider yourself. Caroline and David, how do your technologies help with the conversations that get to that boardroom level around navigating duties of care, navigating care governance requirements and the like, and simplify to give a better line of sight and comfort that this is a strategic direction which isn't a bridge too far, as may have been the case in the past?
Thanks. Business intelligence views are really important. So being able to demonstrate incidents, infections, wounds, even at that clinical level in a captured way, hospital admissions, lead events, things of that nature, business intelligence is really important. Having that reporting capability and like with the surveys, being able to, and when we put TelTouch into one site, for example, they had within a whole year probably 20 different feedbacks. They got 1,000 feedbacks within a month, positive and negative, once we implemented the TelTouch system. So it's also using the technology, the reporting, and then using the technology to gather as much information as possible to enable you to get that. That's what's really important. So from a care perspective, there's all sorts of areas that the boards will be able to use to make some further decisions.
James just mentioned duty of care, Robin, and Byron. We discuss this often. People operating retirement villages, duty of care really isn't in their vocabulary. Once you get into this area of providing support, duty of care is a really significant thing, even though you might think that you're operating under the Retirement Village Act, because directly or indirectly you're saying we will support you and you have that alien person. Can you explain, Robin, duty of care for the audience?
Yes. So duty of care is in its simplest form, it's a common law concept, which basically says that depending on the relationship between parties, they may be under an obligation to do or not do things to avoid harm to someone from foreseeable risk. So the common law recognises a number of categories where there's clearly an established duty of care, things like doctor, patient, teacher, student, employer, employee are obvious ones. The courts have not gone so far as to categorise retirement living operators and residents as an absolute category of duty of care. However, there's no doubt that there will be a duty of care by even an ordinary standard and living operator to their residents, given the nature of the relationship, the proximity of them, and what promises are made to them around what the operator will be doing while they live in the village. However, that duty of care in an independent living unit environment is probably relatively limited. It certainly wouldn't extend to you needing to provide care to someone who gets to the point where they need it if you've been very clear about the fact that you are not a care provider. However, what we have seen in the last years in the sector is a growing trend for every independent living operator to either facilitate some sort of care in the village by bringing in some external providers, or taking on certain sort of well-being obligations into their community. So there has been somewhat of a blurring of this duty of care concept about how far does an operator's duty go to protect their residents from harm in relation to certain events. So the things that are already a bit blurred. The reality will be that And the other thing that's blurred by effectively is a lot of representations that are made at the point of sale, in marketing material, and even in contracts about what operators will do. And we do often see some marketing material that goes a little bit further than perhaps the operator intends, which does muddy the water further. And it does start to engage then issues around misrepresentation under strong consumer law. And also the RB Acts will have provisions in them around providing misinformation to residents, which ultimately can end up in contracts being rescinded. So there are a number of avenues residents have if they believe that they've been represented to about a level of care that they don't ultimately receive, and there is some harm or damage resulting. But moving into the private care sector, you're going to engage them with the Aged Care Act, and the Aged Care Act has some very stringent statutory duties of care that registered providers are going to be very scrutinised over. So there's effectively, the common law concept of duty of care is enshrined in the Aged Care Act in a very significant way. So registered providers have a duty to to do everything reasonably practical to avoid any of the recipients' health, safety being put in a compromised position by their actions and the way the business is organised and run, and the way their staff operate. And as I've said, that duty can't be escaped. There is also there's also a responsible person duty, which extends that duty right up to board level. Anybody in the executive leadership team, so they've all got obligations to make sure that the registered provider business are doing all the right things to avoid that sort of harm to their recipients. And also that duty can't be delegated to third-party providers. So they're all significant duties. So there's no doubt that moving into the private care arena and taking on much more serious, foreseeable risks with your community of residents, and also not just more foreseeable risks, but risks that will lead to more serious harm given someone in a very aged or frail condition. There's no doubt that the duty of care is going to be significantly enhanced. But hey, it's a business risk that just needs to be managed. And the sorts of things that manage the technologies you're talking about help you manage that risk really well, and having all the right governance in place in your business to achieve that. One of the things I do think about, I'm not sure on whether you separate. One of the things I think is probably advantageous is that the operator of the RV may be a different entity from the provider of the private care for a number of reasons. I mean, it petitions risk to some extent, but it also avoids a little bit of inconsistencies, some awkward little ways in which the RV.
Sorry.
But I don't think there's words.
Oh, okay. Yes, use that.
Sorry. It also will avoid. It will also avoid the way the RBA sits with uncomfortably with some of the Aged Care Act requirements, which is a little bit technical to talk about today. But we just want to make sure that care provision services don't get caught into the current charges under the RB Act, because that has significant problems on a budgeting point of view. But yes, that's so duty of care is something that is very important, and operators need to be very mindful of. But again, not all that scary, just managed well.
Thank you very much. We're actually coming up to 10 o'clock. There are 2 points. Byron, sorry?
No, I was just going to add to that, very quickly, it all comes down to your governance. So if you are thinking about doing it, have a look at your risk management framework, get your board online, they'll review the risk appetite statement. They need to own the decision, and then that will filter down through all of your frameworks.
Thank you. There are just 2 points I'd like to make as we round up. I think we can see that private aged care is becoming a thing. Our emphasis is on the fact that the customer is going to demand it, and they're going to demonstrate that demand by entering a retirement village, and they and their family are going to refuse for that person to leave. Then you have the duty of care situation with the DCM Institute. We have over 600 village managers. At every professional development day, the village managers are saying, I have a resident that I know should be in aged care. Their daughter I'm on speed dial to the daughter thinks I'm responsible for that care, and what am I doing? There is nowhere locally that they can go. And home care packages, they've been waiting 12, 18 months for. So so that duty of care is still going to occur because it's going to be expected with the village manager that you're on location, you've got oversight of mum and dad. That's the first point. Second point is, Robin and I were talking last week about what does this mean in terms of home care services. And Robin said, well, independent operators will just get home care providers in. And then he said, hang on a sec, how many home care providers have we got? Have we got enough to service all the retirement villages? And will they want to give their services to the retirement village operator if you can now get in fee for service? So increasingly, home care providers will be saying, you've only got so much, 7 hours a week for a level 4 home package under the old system. You need 8 hours and I can charge you for it. So I prefer to keep control of my customer base rather than having it in a retirement village because my workforce is limited. So don't assume that an independent home care provider will be wanting to work with you and provide the services in your village. That's the first point. The second point, out of AI, through our hypothesis and discussions saying, well, getting a workforce to work in home care is nigh impossible. The view is that within the next 3 years, let's say, there's a whole swathe of knowledge workers, school leavers, university leavers, and the 50-year-olds who will now be retrenched or not able to get a job, and they'll be keen to live in and work in their local area. So we have a property up in the Northern Beaches. You can't find a home care provider to save yourself, but we know that within 3 years, there's a whole swathe of people who will be unemployed and keen to work in home care on the Northern Beaches. That's a positive note to end this discussion. Thank you very much. Can we please show our appreciation for the council?